Right, team. Okay, cool. So, team, we're going to be talking today about, are you eating enough protein? Now, this is probably the question that I get asked the most when we're starting to talk about nutrition. We've maybe done a bit of a food diary and we want to know what the next steps are. So, are we eating enough protein? You won't guess your way to your target. Here's how to get it right without overcomplicating it. So, we've probably heard that protein is important, and we spoke about this on last week's call. But how much do we actually need? Before we get into it, let's recap what we did and spoke about last week. So 4 main points, right? Number 1 is you must eat enough protein, right? Otherwise, if we're not, we could potentially be losing muscle as weight and not fat. Key point to note down here, especially we've only potentially got scales as metrics to use. It's important that we're going to be getting enough protein on to maintain muscle mass. Point number 2, protein is your number 1 macronutrient. So we spoke about this, right? It comes from the Greek word protos, and that means most important. So carbs and fats are secondary to the king, and in this instance, protein is your king. Point number 3, protein are the building blocks for the body. So what we need to make sure of, and I use the analogy of like builders on a site. So imagine you've got bricklayers on a site, they've got no bricks. It's important that we're giving the body enough resources so it can go about and do all the bodily processes it needs. So protein are the building blocks for the body. And then point number 4, we need a daily supply of protein. So we spoke about fat. We can store a large amount of body fat. We know that. We can store some carbohydrates. We can't store a readily available protein pool or source. So if we're not getting enough protein on board, the body's then going to think, how are we going to get this? How are we going to get the building blocks for all of the other bodily processes? The chances are it's probably going to take it from your muscle, which is not what we want. So how much protein do we actually need? So I'm currently studying my precision nutrition course. So this is an extract from the section in macronutrients. What we're going to do is just quickly, briefly run over this. But essentially what we're going to look at here is the numbers in the middle. So 0.8, 0.8 to 1.2, 1.2 to 1.6 and so on. These numbers are here as ranges. And what we'd essentially do is we would take your body weight and we would times it by the numbers in your range to give you then your protein target. Now for me, and the majority of my clients, the aim is to understand where we're currently at. So where's the baseline, what we're currently doing, and move up towards the chosen range for you. Now, I think for me, the majority of people who I work with, when we're training more, we have a little bit more care about building some muscle mass, toning up, looking good like on holiday, losing body fat, etc. Chances are, if we're in this camp, we're going to want to be hitting at least 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram every day. Right, so every single day. This is not on training days and non-training days. This is something that we're going to try and hit on a daily basis. So as a bare minimum, 1.6 grams times your body weight would be a good place to start, or at least work up to. So with that being said, we want to take a quick look at what the numbers say at the moment. So the numbers say at the moment, if we want to avoid malnutrition and protein deficiency, we want to be eating 0.8 grams per kilogram. So if somebody weighed, quick maths here, if somebody weighed 50 kilograms, they'd want to be having 40 grams per day. Now, fortunately for us, we live in a location in the world where we have an abundance of food. So we're probably not going to be in the camp of wanting to prevent malnutrition, luckily. The question I want to ask you is, who do you want to be? So if you want to be someone who just gets by, then cool, this might not be enough, maybe. Sorry, this might be enough, but maybe. Now, the clients I'm working with, the chances are we want to lose body fat, build muscle, feel better, increase energy, etc. So you're probably someone who wants to be performing at your best every single day, and you want to try and optimize your lifestyle to feel unstoppable. I think I was probably in this camp, and I still am to this day. So 0.8 grams per kilogram probably is not going to cut it for us. Hence why I said we want to be aiming for at least 1.6 grams. So the general consensus of metrics and ranges, etc., is if we want to be losing body fat, we want to be toning up, we want to be building muscle, and building muscle, it doesn't mean we're going to be like a bodybuilder, and we want to perform at our best, then the aim is for us to be hitting the below ranges. Now, for general health, 1.2 to 1.6 grams, if we look back here, right, 1.2 to 1.6, this is more like for general health. That's absolutely fine. 1.2 is like coming out as a sort of new bare minimum. For the majority of us, we're going to be in the camp of fat loss and muscle retention, muscle growth, and for those who are highly active, training probably 6-7 days a week at a pretty high standard. So at a bare minimum, you can see here on the right hand side, 1.6 grams is the minimum. Now, the reason we give ranges as well is we can start to work into these ranges, whether it's at a bottom end or whether it's at the top end. So let's say, for example, we're looking at this and somebody is eating around 1.2 grams. A stepping stone for us might be to work from 1.2 to 1.6. If we can get to 1.6 and hold it and feel good, and we're doing it on a consistent basis, we then might say, right, can we take the 1.6 up towards 2 or up towards 2.2 and look at this as a stepping stone to work up to. So we're always going to be taking into account where you are currently, hence why we want to do some sort of food diary, some sort of tracking, just to build in some awareness of what we're currently doing. And then from there, we can then figure out what the best next step is for you to then start to work up the ladder. And then once we sort of get to a point where you have your body weight, we have a protein target range that we want to be in, chances are that's going to be pretty constant for the foreseeable future. So you're not really going to have to change that too much. Let's do some quick maths. So let's start with two different people. On the left-hand side, we've got Brian. Shout out Brian. He's a 63 kilogram man. He's 55. He trains twice per week doing some spin classes. His focus is to prevent osteoporosis, stay mobile in old age. So it's safe to say that as a starting point, or at least as a target for Brian to aim for, would be at a bare minimum 1.6. And then obviously on the upper range is 2.2. So if we took his weight, right, this is how it's done. So 63 kilograms times 1.6 equals 100.8 grams. If we look at the top end range, so we go 63 times 2.2, this is 138.6 grams. So it's a bit of a mathematical error there from myself as I changed the slide just for. So what this should say is the range is 100 at a bare minimum and 138 at top end range. So what you can see there is you'd have a 38 gram difference on the bottom end and the top end. Now what that does for you is it just gives Brian a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more balance day to day, to make sure that, look, some days he might hit the lower end, some days he might hit the top end, but the main focus is, can we be within those ranges? Let's look at person two. So person two is Jamie. Shout out Jamie. He's 86 kilograms, he's 30 years old, he trains 5 times per week with a mixture of strength and running. His focus is to build muscle, drive performance, and stay healthy. So whereas Brian was looking to obviously, prevent osteoporosis, stay mobile, a little bit more health driven, Jamie is training a lot more and probably wants to be hitting the higher targets. So somewhere in the region of 2 to 2.5. So we take his weight, 86, we times it on the bottom end, so 2, that gets us 172 grams. If we take his weight of 86 and we look at the top end range of 2.5, we get 215 grams. So his range would be 172 on the bottom end and 215 at the top end. So we can see a bit of a difference here in the weight of both people and also the protein ranges. But once this number's there, we're pretty much just going to be set. So hopefully that makes sense. A quick caveat. So normally a question people would think or ask is it a limit or a target, Tom? Now, the reason I say this is my dad's a driving instructor. So when we was driving or learning to drive, shout out my dad, we saw a miles per hour sign and my dad said, right, Tom, is this a limit or is this a target? And being young and dumb, full of cum and cocky little fucker, I was like, yes, a target, Dad. He's like, no, it's a limit. So in this instance, obviously it was a limit. When we're talking about protein, we're not looking at this as a limit. This is a target. This is something that we are looking to hit. We want to hit this every single day. And the reason I say this is because if we go back to this slide, it's important we need a daily supply of protein, right? If we're active individuals and we're breaking down bodily tissue, breaking down connective tissue, muscle, cartilage, all that sort of stuff, and we're putting an emphasis and a stimulus on the body whereby it's sort of breaking down, right? Because training is quite catabolic. So when we're training, it's actually breaking down the body a little bit. If the body doesn't have the right resources, i.e. protein, it's not then going to be able to then develop, grow, repair, so you get fitter, stronger, faster, and all that sort of stuff. So it's really important, right? We need a daily supply, and your protein is a target to hit. Okay, it's something we need to aim for every single day. So my thoughts on the topic is, number one, you should be prioritizing protein in your diet. For everybody who I have coached up until this day, and myself included, probably for the first couple of years when I knew absolutely jack shit about nutrition, I was under eating protein. And the main thing that we can do is, if we're trying to simplify stuff, because life is busy, we want to make sure that we're trying to, as a starting point, aim to increase protein within the diet. That is number one. So if you're a bit low at the moment, I would definitely think about increasing your protein. Number two, high quality protein is going to be best wherever possible. Let's think whole foods versus processed. If we take a chicken breast versus processed chicken, yes, they're both chicken on the label. However, one is probably going to give you a much better payoff and investment on your, I guess, money or calories, so to speak, and you're going to get a much better investment if you're thinking about eating chicken breast, whole foods versus processed chicken. So whole foods where possible. Number three, we want to try and be hitting this every single day. Obviously, I just spoke about this. This is a target to be aiming for. And I don't think you should be coming away from it until you get to a place where you can start to actually get a bit of a hold on it and you become a little bit more consistent. So it's not a when you feel like it kind of thing. It's not, I'll do it in the week, but I won't do it on the weekends. I'll do it on my training days, but not on my non-training days. Let this be a staple every single day for you. And chances are you're going to see a lot of upturn. And then point four, there are going to be very few downsides to eating more protein. Chances are you will see a huge upturn in your overall energy, the way you feel, hunger, soreness is a huge one that people talk about. So for me, there's a few points here that we can work on, but as a general rule of thumb, aiming for a bare minimum of 1.6 grams per day, and then as you work up 2 to 2.2 to 2.5, depending where you sit in this little table. I think as a general rule, this is probably going to answer a lot of questions that people have when they talk about protein. And let's just keep things really, really simple, because I think the simpler we can keep this, the easier it is for you to implement. So yeah, I hope that makes sense, team. Yeah, sweet. Any questions, let me know. All right, how did we then end this? Eating enough protein. Okay. I'm proud of myself, man, for that.